The pressure is on to lift interest rates as the unemployment rate falls to a 14-year low. The Federal Education Minister takes on teachers and doesn't miss. And why it's time to book a cheap holiday flight. It's Friday the 18th of March 2022. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. Are you well?
I'm really well. Are you well after St. Patrick's Day? I think that's the biggest question here.
Oh, no, I am. I was very sensible. I enjoyed celebrating my heritage, but not too much.
Look, quick question without notice for you, Sean. On Monday, you had some homework to do. You were going to go off and listen to Fear and Greed via a smart speaker. So you were either going to say, and I don't want to trigger all of them, but, you know, hey, Google, hey, Siri. I don't know why I'm kind of whispering this part, or Siri, or saying to Alexa, and you say, play the Fear and Greed podcast. Did you do it?
It works. Siri did it for me. Siri and I are friends, use Siri all the time. And suddenly there we were. Play the Fear and Greed podcast. And there we were, Michael, you and I.
Do you sometimes forget that Siri's not a real person and find yourself thanking Siri?
She's not? Thanking her? Not quite. Oh, no, but what I do find is like I'm in a cafe and I'm answering an email via my phone and Siri's helping me. And inevitably, I say that, or I stop and say, no, just a flat white thanks, in the middle of the text message or email.
Yes.
And as a result, it just stuffs up the flow of the conversation on text messages and emails continually. And
the whole thing is transcribed, and suddenly your business contacts are wondering why you're ordering a flat white from them.
And then you have to go through the whole rigmarole of explaining it. Anyway, move on. Yes, I have tried the smart speakers. Play the Fear and Greed podcast. It works, at least on Siri.
Fantastic. And stay listening for Sean's chat to Jarden Australia Chief Economist Carlos Cacho about the employment numbers. And it really was a spectacular result yesterday, wasn't it, Sean? The unemployment rate last month fell to 4%, the lowest since August 2008, and just a touch away from the lowest level on record.
Yes, the Bureau of Stats figures were unambiguously strong, I'd say. I'm looking forward to hearing Stephen Koukoulas on Monday about it because he will be very excited about it. There were 77,000 jobs created, comprising 122,000 full-time jobs versus a loss of 45,000 part-time roles. Annual employment growth is running at about 3%. That's the best in a long, long time. The participation rate, that's a number of people wanting to work, is now at a record high. Total hours worked jumped 9%, and underutilisation of the labour force continues to fall. Quite incredible, the results.
All right, quick economics lesson for me here, Sean. Reasons. What contributes to the strength in the labour market in the situation that we're in at the moment?
Well, the economy's rebounded very strongly since the COVID lockdowns and restrictions, no doubt about that. New South Wales was a particularly strong performer last month, and that does reflect the fact that it had plenty of restrictions and lockdowns late last year and into this year. The government's also still spending plenty of money to prop things up. Interest rates remain at all-time lows. Throw in a closed international border, which has reduced the supply of labour, and you have a pretty incredible employment market for anyone out there wanting to get a job. On top of that, all the leading indicators of employment growth suggest there's more to come. Job ads are up, hiring intentions are up, just boom times for the labour force.
With all of that in mind, then surely the Reserve Bank must be thinking about lifting interest rates.
What I find interesting, no one is talking about waiting until 2024 to lift interest rates, as the Reserve Bank was talking about a couple of months ago. Most market economists now think it will happen this year. It could happen as early as May, according to some. The last time the unemployment rate was as low as 4%, the official cash rate was 7.25%. Today, it's just 0.1%. Something there doesn't add up. The Reserve Bank is waiting to see wages growth, and that will come through eventually. Also, the local inflation rate is nowhere near as high as the US inflation rate, so that does give our central bank just a little bit more breathing room.
Sean, we have an election coming up. Do you think the Reserve Bank would delay raising rates until afterwards? Do they take that kind of thing into account?
I don't think they would. I mean, popular opinion is that they'd wait because they don't want to favour either side of politics. They want to be apolitical. But if they delay a rate rise when it's needed, then they're not being apolitical at all. They're actually favouring the incumbents. So I think the Reserve Bank will do what it thinks is best for the economy. Having said that, most economists don't think it will lift rates until after May, which of course is when the next poll is due.
Now, the labour force figures certainly helped boost the Aussie dollar, Sean.
It did. The local currency jumped beyond 73 US cents. In the short term, currencies do depend somewhat on what investors think will happen to interest rates. If they think rates will rise, then a currency is more likely to appreciate.
Sean, it had already appreciated, though, yesterday, hadn't it? And this probably just goes to how big a day it was yesterday, after the US Federal Reserve had lifted its official interest rate and signalled that there were more to come throughout the rest of the year, pretty much the whole year.
Yes, that was the news that really dominated financial markets over the past 24 hours, the US move. What was most relevant yesterday morning was not so much the 0.25 percentage point increase by the Fed, but the fact that Chairman Jerome Powell indicated that rates would increase consistently for the rest of the year until they got to about 1.75% or 2%, and that should be enough. He provided a sense of certainty about what's going to happen to US interest rates, given the backdrop of near 8% inflation. As a result, he alleviated fears that rates might have to go much higher. That certainly calmed markets. It sent Wall Street much higher, and the Aussie dollar, as a result, it also lifted because US dollar depreciated because rates aren't going as high in that economy as people might have thought.
So Wall Street was sent up and the local market followed suit then too.
Yeah, that's right. The S&P ASX 200 finished yesterday up 1.1% to 7,251 points. About 80% of companies rose, led by the tech sector. It was really interesting to watch. Tech stocks are expected to underperform when interest rates rise, but tech stocks globally jumped because the Fed's comments weren't as hawkish. That means that rates won't rise as much as expected. Therefore, that was good for the tech sector. In fact, Block, which now owns Afterpay and trades on the ASX, it was up 10% yesterday. Incredible jump.
Wow.
Obviously, that just reflected what happened on Wall Street. Locally, the banks and miners all did well. In fact, most companies did well yesterday. The underperformers really were the supermarkets, Woolworths and Coles.
All right, big start to the show. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, the US Federal Reserve wasn't the only news that was calming markets yesterday. Ukraine and Russia said they'd made significant progress on a tentative peace plan, which includes a ceasefire. So that's pretty promising news.
It is, but there are plenty of conditions before Russia will withdraw its troops, including Kyiv declaring neutrality and accepting limits on its armed forces. But certainly it's a step in the right direction. But Michael, it is so hard to know exactly how much progress is actually being made. We got that news yesterday, which was great. About the same time, US President Joe Biden approved a $1 billion spending package for Ukraine. And for the first time, he called Russian President Vladimir Putin a war criminal. The Kremlin then responded and said the comment was unforgivable. No, none of that sounds very conciliatory from either side, as far as I'm concerned. There are also reports that 1,000 civilians were sheltering in a theatre in the southern city of Mariupol when it was bombed by Russian troops. So the peace talks are hopeful, but wow, there's some tragedy going on in the meantime.
Yeah, there certainly is. Now, back home, Sean, I mentioned this one at the start of the show. I don't really know what to make of it. Federal Education Minister Stuart Robert won very few friends among his constituents yesterday when he suggested getting rid of the bottom 10% of dud teachers.
Yes, he came out all guns firing, blaming Australia's falling standards in maths, literacy and science rankings on bad teaching. He said the curriculum and the dud teachers were dragging Australian students down. According to the Australian newspaper, he said it was nuts that young history students are being taught to identify racist statues. He said teachers who weren't up to it shouldn't be protected. Then, Michael, just to make sure he was fully heard and sure everyone got his point, Mr. Roberts said private schools did not tolerate low-performing teachers, and he suggested substandard teachers were being employed by state-run public schools. Now, how to upset parents and teachers alike? I think he's wrong. I just don't think it's fair to say that substandard teachers are particularly at one or the other. But wow, talk about firing at the teachers.
Yeah. Look, I think there's a couple of things that really teachers could well be paid more to attract some really kind of high-performing experts into the profession. That might be one thing. But the other thing is I kind of picture the minister, the head of the department. So he runs the whole show. I kind of picture him as the CEO, essentially. Can you imagine a CEO of a company coming out and just having a crack at the people working in his or her own business in the same way that Stuart Robert has just done?
Yeah, the boss of Woolworths having a go at the checkout people.
Yeah, it's just not on. You want to know that the minister has your back?
And I just think he's plainly wrong. Just work practices in state and private schools are archaic. I think that's true. So for him to say, actually distinguish between the two, I just think he's actually factually incorrect before we even get to the point of supporting your staff. Anyway, there'll be plenty more on it, Michael.
Oh, there certainly will be. And you know what? You don't take on the teachers like that because there are very few workforces that are as effectively unionised as the teachers. And so they are not going to take this one lying down.
And after COVID, where any of us with kids have basically felt sorry for what teachers have had to put up with and contend with, and such admiration for them for what they've done during COVID, and suddenly he takes them on. It's a bit like the nurses. Crazy.
Oh, tough jobs. And, oh, God, do you reckon the minister's just looking at himself in the mirror last night and just goes, oh, might have overstepped the mark there a little bit. Jeez, let's move on, Sean. Consumer Protections Group Choice is calling on the federal government to ensure buy now, pay later providers have the same regulatory scrutiny as other lenders.
Yes, Choice is joined with 9 other consumer groups in other countries to call for action in Australia, given the buy now, pay later sector here is more advanced than anywhere else. In short, consumer groups are worried that customers will end up with big debts that they can't pay because the sector is pretty much unregulated. This has been a worry that's been brought up for a number of years now. It actually gets worse, though, when you take a look at Choice's data on the sector. 30% of Australians have used buy now, pay later in the past 12 months. Fine. 1 in 5 of those have used it for essential goods like food, groceries, and utilities. That's where it starts to get concerning, where people are making payments just to live. I think that is scary, and there really does need to be protection for consumers.
Yeah, sounds like it. Sean, I have some bad news. I hope you have booked your flights to Fiji, considering you're going in a week. I would hope you have. But the number of cheap airfares are declining.
Yes, Michael, alas, data from the Bureau of Infrastructure, Transport and Regional Economics for this month shows that discount airfares aren't anywhere near as prevalent as they were 9 months ago. In fact, discount economy prices are now at their highest level in over a year. Part of this is because people are flying again. Airlines don't need to attract people quite as much. Part of it's because of higher fuel prices for airlines. Obviously, just like we pay more for petrol, airlines pay more for jet fuel. Having said all that, though, Michael, there are still some bargains around. So according to this report, flights to Bali at the moment are being discounted heavily. That's only just reopened in recent weeks, as are seats at the pointy end of the aircraft. Business airfares are now about half their long-term average. Here's your opportunity.
Certainly is. Sean, COVID cases continue to rise. We were talking about this yesterday, and they're still heading up.
Unfortunately, that's right, Michael. There were 7,200 cases in Queensland yesterday, 7,200 cases also in Western Australia, and its Premier Mark McGowan said the state was days away from its expected caseload peak. Let's hope he's right. The ACT recorded 1,300 new cases, Tasmania was at 1,900, and Victoria was at 9,800. But New South Wales is where the subvariant of Omicron is really taking hold, with more than 20,000 new cases recorded yesterday for the second day in a row.
Couple of quick ones for you, Sean. New Zealand's competition regulator has given the green light for Ampol's $2 billion acquisition of Z Energy.
Yes, it was reliant on Ampol selling its New Zealand distribution business Goal, which it did earlier in the week.
And South Australians go to the poll tomorrow.
They do, and Labor's expected to beat the coalition run by Premier Stephen Marshall. That would be an end to a trend of incumbents winning state elections during the COVID pandemic.
And one last quick one, Sean. New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet has taken paternity leave after his wife gave birth to their 7th child.
Congratulations to them both, but 7. Ouch.
They are going to have their hands full, Sean.
They will. Good on them.
All right, moving on to overseas news. Hong Kong and Chinese share markets jumped yesterday, Sean, after China's Financial Stability and Development Committee promised substantial measures to shore up growth in the world's second largest economy.
Yes, this is really important for Australia, Michael, and, it just added to the good news for investors yesterday. Put it all together, we had peace talks, greater certainty around interest rates in the US, and Beijing authorities saying they wanted to boost the Chinese economy. Not bad. It wasn't only the Asian markets that rose on all that news there, but also all the Chinese companies listed on Wall Street that did really well too.
Sean, there's an argument going on in the US at the moment. I'll be interested to hear what you think about it, because it's about whether the big tech firms, specifically Apple and Google really, whether they should shut down their app stores in Russia.
Yes, it's quite a nuanced argument because at face value, you might think, yes, they should. But according to the Washington Post, some US officials say that unless Apple, Google and others keep operating inside Russia, ordinary Russians won't be able to access news outside of official channels. And so rather than pull out, the big tech companies should step up their efforts in the country. Since the war began, Russia has imposed new laws penalising speech, thus knocking out many of the major news sites. And also the top downloaded apps in Russia since the war began have been Telegram, WhatsApp and Threema, all ways of sharing unapproved news. It's an interesting one, and I suspect that the longer that Apple, Google and others operate, the better the information flow will be to Russian people.
Yeah, certainly. And Sean, a powerful earthquake measuring 7.4 on the Richter scale has hit Japan.
Yes, it hit the northeastern coast of the country yesterday, leaving 2 dead and 81 injured. A high-speed bullet train was derailed and a tsunami warning was triggered, though later lifted. That tsunami warning included the coastal area that houses the disabled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. That's the one that was hit by a tsunami in 2011. The tsunami itself killed almost 20,000 people and sparked a mass evacuation from around the nuclear plant. I'm sure there were a lot of very, very nervous people in Japan yesterday.
Now, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview. And today, Sean, you're speaking to Carlos Cacho, the Chief Economist at Jarden Australia.
I am. We went through all the big economic news over the past 24 hours, the US Fed, local labour market, and what it all means for the Reserve Bank and interest rates. Carlos is great at turning economics into English. Well worth a listen, this one.
If you want to listen to two very excited economists, then listen to Sean Almer speaking to Carlos Cacho. That's up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Friday, the 18th of March, 2022. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Twitter and Facebook. And don't forget to give your smart speaker a go. Just ask to play the Fear and Greed podcast. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.